Ambassador Marcus Chun adjusted his silver tie one final time before stepping out of the transport shuttle. The Zephyrian diplomatic station hung in space like a massive crystal flower, its translucent petals catching starlight and bending it into rainbow patterns across the hull. Beautiful, he thought, but cold. Everything about the Zephyrians seemed designed to remind visitors that they were dealing with a superior species. The artificial gravity engaged as Marcus walked down the shuttle ramp, his polished black shoes clicking against the metal. His diplomatic suit was perfectly tailored, dark navy with silver threading that caught the light just enough to suggest importance without appearing flashy. To anyone watching, he looked exactly like what he was supposed to be, a mid-level human diplomat sent to negotiate mining rights for Earth's struggling colonies. What they didn't know was that Marcus Chun had spent 12 years in Earth's Special Operations Division before accepting his diplomatic posting. The suit hid scars from plasma burns and knife wounds. The briefcase in his left hand contained standard diplomatic papers, but his right hand knew exactly where the hidden weapon was sewn into his jacket lining. Ambassador Chun, came a voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Marcus turned to see Ambassador Vethera approaching, her elongated limbs moving with a fluid grace all Zephyrians possessed. Her skin shimmered between blue and silver, and her large eyes held the kind of ancient wisdom that came from a species that had mastered interstellar travel when humans were still learning to make fire. Ambassador Vethera, Marcus replied, offering a respectful bow. Thank you for agreeing to these negotiations. Earth is grateful for the opportunity. Vethera's expression remained neutral, but Marcus caught the slight tightening around her eyes. In his briefings, he learned that Zephyrians considered humans to be barely evolved primates who had stumbled into space travel through luck rather than intelligence. They tolerated human presence in their sector of space the same way humans might tolerate a neighbor's annoying but harmless pet. The Council will see you shortly, Vethera said, gesturing toward a corridor that stretched away like the inside of a soap bubble. I trust your journey was comfortable? Very much so, Marcus lied smoothly. The 3-week journey in the cramped diplomatic vessel had been anything but comfortable, but complaining would only reinforce their view of humans as weak and needy. As they walked through corridors filled with soft, musical light, Marcus let his trained eyes catalog everything. Security stations were marked by subtle changes in the wall patterns. Guard positions were betrayed by slightly worn spots on the floor where feet stood for long periods. Exit routes presented themselves as decorative alcoves that actually contained emergency transport nodes. Old habits from his military days died hard, and Marcus had learned long ago that the most dangerous situations often came disguised as peaceful ones. The council chamber was a sphere of transparent material hanging in the center of the station, surrounded by the vast darkness of space. Stars wheeled slowly around them as the station rotated, creating a sense of floating in the cosmic void that would have been unsettling if Marcus hadn't spent years working in zero-gravity environments during his special ops career. 5 Zephyrian council members sat in chairs that seemed to grow from the floor like crystalline trees. Their leader, Prime Counselor Zeth Mose, was ancient even by Zephyrian standards. His skin had taken on a deep purple hue that spoke of centuries of life, and his eyes held the weight of decisions that had shaped the fate of star systems. Human, Zeth Mose said, and the single word carried layers of dismissal that Marcus had learned to ignore during his diplomatic training. You come seeking access to the Kepler 442 system. This is too ambitious for your species. Marcus opened his briefcase and withdrew a data tablet, his movements precise and professional. Prime Counselor, Earth's colonies in the Outer Rim are experiencing critical shortages of rare Earth elements. The mining surveys of Kepler 442b show deposits that could sustain our settlements for decades. We're prepared to offer significant concessions in exchange for limited mining rights. Concessions, repeated Counselor Nethira, the youngest of the 5. Her voice carried amusement like a child watching an ant try to move a crumb. What could humans possibly offer that we would find valuable? Marcus had expected this question. It was standard Zephyrian negotiating tactics to establish dominance early by emphasizing human inferiority. He'd been briefed on 17 different approaches to handle it. Agricultural technology, he said calmly. Our food production methods have improved efficiency in low-gravity environments by 40% over the past decade. We're also willing to share our advances in stellar cartography and our recent breakthroughs in quantum communication arrays. The council members exchanged looks that Marcus recognized as their equivalent of laughter. Counselor Vorthanese leaned forward, his silver skin reflecting the starlight streaming through the chamber walls. Humans offering technology to Zephyrians, he said. This is like insects offering to teach birds how to fly. Marcus maintained his neutral expression, but inside he was calculating. The insults were more intense than his briefings had suggested they would be. Either the Zephyrians were testing his limits, or something had changed in their attitude toward humans since his last intelligence update. Perhaps, he said carefully, but insects have survived on thousands of worlds where more advanced species have failed to adapt. Sometimes perspective matters more than raw capability. The silence that followed his words was different from before. Marcus realized he had crossed some invisible line. The council members' expressions shifted from casual dismissal to something that looked almost like anger. Prime Counselor Zeth Mose stood slowly, his ancient form unfolding like a prayer. Ambassador Chun, he said, and now his voice carried the chill of deep space. You mistake our politeness for weakness, and our hospitality for respect. Let me clarify the situation for you. The lights in the chamber dimmed, and suddenly, the stars outside weren't just beautiful points of light. They became reminders of how far from home Marcus really was, how alone he was in this crystal sphere surrounded by beings who could kill him with a thought. Your species has expanded into space through theft and violence, Zethmos continued. You take what you cannot create, fight wars over resources you cannot manage, and spread chaos wherever your ships travel. The fact that we allow human colonies to exist at all is an act of mercy that apparently you mistake for partnership. Marcus kept his breathing steady, but his right hand moved fractionally closer to his jacket. Not enough to be noticed, but enough to cut the distance if things went bad quickly. The Kepler 442 system belongs to the Zephyrian Collective, announced Counselor Nethira. It has belonged to us for 3 centuries, long before your species learned to build ships that could survive longer than a few months in space. The idea that we would grant mining rights to humans is insulting. Then, why agree to negotiations? Marcus asked, his diplomatic training warring with his growing suspicion that he'd walked into something much more dangerous than a simple trade discussion. The council members exchanged another look, and this time Marcus was certain he saw calculation in their expressions. Not the calculation of beings deciding on a business deal, but the calculation of predators deciding when to strike. Because, said Counselor Vorthanese slowly, it serves our purposes to remind humans of their place in the cosmic order. And because we have grown tired of your species' constant expansion into territories where you do not belong. Marcus felt the familiar cold clarity that had kept him alive through a dozen combat operations settle over his mind. The negotiations had been a sham from the beginning. The Zephyrians hadn't brought him here to discuss mining rights. They brought him here to send a message back to Earth, and Marcus was beginning to suspect that message wouldn't be delivered by a living ambassador. I see, he said quietly. And what message would you like me to take back to Earth? Prime Counselor Zethmos smiled, an expression that on a Zephyrian face looked like winter dawn breaking over a graveyard. Oh, Ambassador Chun, he said, you misunderstand. You won't be taking any message back to Earth. The chamber's lights died completely, leaving only the cold light of distant stars. In the darkness, Marcus heard the soft whisper of movement as figures began to close in around his position. His hand found the hidden weapon in his jacket, fingers tracing the familiar outline of the plasma knife that had saved his life more times than he could count. The Zephyrians had made a critical error in their intelligence gathering. They knew Marcus Chun was a diplomat, but They had no idea what he had been before accepting that posting. They saw the suit and the briefcase and the polite words, and they assumed they were dealing with a soft civilian who would die quietly when the time came. Marcus smiled in the darkness as he heard footsteps approaching from multiple directions. Clearly, the Zephyrians had never heard the old Earth saying about judging books by their covers. They were about to learn that some diplomats came with very sharp teeth. The attack came from 3 directions simultaneously, just as his special ops training had taught him to expect. Zephyrians moved like liquid light when they chose to, but Marcus had fought faster opponents in darker places. The plasma knife slid into his palm like an old friend returning home, its edge igniting with a soft blue glow that cast wild shadows around the crystal chamber. The first attacker came from his left, a Zephyrian warrior whose skin had been darkened to near invisibility. Marcus pivoted on his heel and let the alien's momentum carry him past, the plasma knife opening a line across the warrior's torso that glowed briefly before the Zephyrian collapsed. "Impossible," breathed Counselor Nethura from somewhere in the darkness. "Humans don't move like that." Marcus said nothing. He was counting heartbeats and tracking movement patterns, his mind automatically cataloging threats and calculating response options. The second attacker came from above, dropping from the chamber's ceiling with claws extended. Marcus rolled sideways and came up with the knife in a defensive position, its edge meeting Zephyrian talons with a shower of sparks. The alien strike carried enough force to shatter human bones, but Marcus had learned to use an opponent's strength against them. He guided the blow past his head and stepped inside the creature's reach, driving the plasma knife up under the warrior's arm and into the cluster of nerve centers that served as a Zephyrian heart. "Stop this," commanded Prime Counselor Zethmos, his voice cracking with something Marcus had never heard from a Zephyrian before: fear. "You cannot resist us. You are only human." The third attacker hesitated at those words, uncertainty replacing the fluid confidence that had marked the previous assaults. Marcus used that moment of doubt to press his advantage, closing the distance between them with steps that made no sound on the crystal floor. "You're right," he said quietly as his blade found its target. "I'm only human, but sometimes that's enough." Emergency lighting flickered on, bathing the chamber in harsh red illumination that made the scene look like something from a nightmare. 3 Zephyrian warriors lay motionless on the floor, their silver blood forming pools that reflected the warning lights like broken mirrors. The 5 council members stood frozen in their positions, their ancient confidence shattered by the sight of their supposedly superior warriors defeated by a single human in a diplomatic suit. Marcus straightened his tie and checked his jacket for tears, the plasma knife disappearing back into its hidden sheath with practiced ease. When he looked up at the council, his expression was calm and professional, as if he'd just finished reviewing a trade agreement rather than fighting for his life. "Now, then," he said politely, "shall we discuss those mining rights?" The silence in the council chamber stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Prime Counselor Zethmos stared at the human ambassador who stood calmly among the bodies of 3 elite Zephyrian warriors, his diplomatic suit barely wrinkled, his breathing steady as if he'd just finished a pleasant walk rather than a lethal combat encounter. "You killed them," whispered Counselor Vorthanese, his voice carrying the shock of someone whose entire worldview had just crumbled. "They were void hunters, the finest warriors our species has ever produced." Marcus looked down at the fallen Zephyrians with something that might have been regret. "They attacked a diplomatic envoy during negotiations. I responded with appropriate force to defend myself." He met Zethmos' eyes steadily. "Unless Zephyrian law has changed recently, I'm still within my rights as an ambassador." The ancient Prime Counselor's skin had shifted from deep purple to a sickly gray color that Marcus's briefings had told him indicated extreme distress. "Appropriate force?" Zethmos repeated. "You moved like shadow and struck like lightning. No human possesses such abilities. You'd be surprised what humans are capable of when properly motivated," Marcus replied, straightening a cuff that had been displaced during the fighting. "Now about those mining rights." Earth is still very interested in establishing a mutually beneficial arrangement. Counselor Nethira laughed, but the sound held no amusement. It was the laugh of someone teetering on the edge of hysteria. You think this changes anything? You think killing 3 warriors makes you equal to the Zephyrian collective? Marcus tilted his head slightly, studying her with the kind of attention he'd once reserved for bomb disposal work. I think it proves that your intelligence about humans is severely outdated. The question is whether you're wise enough to update your assumptions or foolish enough to double down on a losing strategy. The chamber's communication system chimed with an urgent tone that made all 5 council members stiffen. A holographic display materialized in the center of the room, showing the face of Admiral Korthvel, commander of the Zephyrian Defense Fleet. "Prime Counselor," the Admiral said, his voice crackling through the transmission. "We're receiving disturbing reports from the diplomatic section. Sensors detected plasma discharge and casualties." Zethmos glanced at Marcus, who remained perfectly still with his hands clasped behind his back in a posture of diplomatic attention. "The situation is complex, Admiral. The human ambassador has proven to be more resourceful than anticipated." Admiral Korthvel's expression darkened. "Shall I deploy security teams to contain the threat?" "That won't be necessary," Marcus said, stepping forward just enough to be visible in the holographic display. "Admiral, I'm Ambassador Marcus Chun of the Earth Diplomatic Corps. I've come to negotiate mining rights for the Kepler 442 system, and I'd very much like to conclude these talks without further misunderstandings." The Admiral stared at Marcus for a long moment, his trained eye taking in details that the council members had missed. The way the human stood with perfect balance on the balls of his feet. The controlled breathing that suggested combat training. The micro-expressions that spoke of someone accustomed to high-stress situations. "Prime Counselor," Admiral Korthvel said slowly, "I recommend extreme caution. This human is not what he appears to be." "No," agreed Zethmos, his voice heavy with the weight of 3 centuries of life and the bitter taste of assumptions proven wrong. "He is not." The hologram flickered and disappeared, leaving the council alone with a human who had just shattered every preconception they'd held about his species. Marcus waited patiently for them to process what had happened, understanding that shock took time to resolve into either acceptance or escalation. "What are you?" asked Counselor Ethmira, who had remained silent throughout the entire encounter. She was younger than the others, her skin still holding the bright silver of youth, but her eyes showed the keen intelligence that had earned her a seat on the council. "I'm a diplomat," Marcus answered honestly. "But before I was a diplomat, I was other things. Earth finds it useful to send negotiators who can handle themselves in difficult situations." "Difficult situations," Vorthanes repeated. "Is that what you call the systematic murder of our finest warriors?" Marcus felt a flicker of irritation. "I call it self-defense against an unprovoked attack during diplomatic negotiations. If your finest warriors couldn't distinguish between an ambassador and a threat, perhaps they weren't as fine as you believed." The insult hung in the air like a weapon, and Marcus saw several of the council members tense, as if preparing to strike. He didn't move, but his stillness carried its own message. He had already proven what happened to Zephyrians who chose violence over words. "You dare insult the honor of the Void Hunters?" Nethira hissed, her graceful form coiled with rage. "I am stating facts," Marcus replied calmly. "Honor doesn't enter into it. They attacked an ambassador under flag of truce. Whatever honor they possessed died when they chose that course of action." Prime Counselor Zethmos raised a hand, and the other council members fell silent. The ancient leader studied Marcus with eyes that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations, weighing options that carried consequences far beyond this single encounter. "You speak of honor and law as if they apply equally to our species," he said finally. "But humans are newcomers to space. Primitives who stumbled into technologies they barely understand. Why should Zephyrian honor extend to creatures who learned interstellar travel by reverse engineering crashed ships?" Marcus nodded slowly. "You're absolutely right. Humans are newcomers. We did stumble into space, travel partly through salvage and reverse engineering. We don't have the ancient wisdom of the Zephyrians or your elegant understanding of cosmic forces. The council members relaxed slightly, thinking the human was finally acknowledging his proper place in the order of things. But Marcus continued, "We have something you seem to have forgotten during your long centuries of assumed superiority. We remember what it's like to fight for survival. We remember what it costs to earn every technological advancement through blood and sacrifice. And we remember that in the universe, respect isn't given based on age or elegance. It's earned through strength." He gestured to the fallen warriors without looking away from Zethmos. "Your void hunters were skilled, probably the finest warriors your species has produced in generations. But they made the mistake of assuming that because humans are young, we must also be weak. They died because they believed your propaganda instead of studying their enemy." The chamber's environmental systems hummed quietly in the background, recycling air that now carried the metallic scent of Zephyrian blood. Marcus noted that none of the council members had called for medical assistance or showed any concern for the fallen warriors. Another useful piece of information about their society. "What do you want?" asked Counselor Ethmira. Her question was direct, cutting through the diplomatic dance that had preceded the violence. "The same thing I wanted when I arrived," Marcus said. "Limited mining rights to Kepler, 442b in exchange for Earth technologies and trade concessions. Nothing has changed from my perspective." "Everything has changed," snapped Vorthanes. "You've proven that humans are dangerous, that your species cannot be trusted." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "I've proven that humans can defend themselves when attacked without provocation during diplomatic negotiations. If that makes us untrustworthy, then I'd suggest your understanding of trust needs serious revision." A new alarm began sounding through the station, a low harmonic tone that made the crystal walls vibrate. Zethmos touched a control surface that grew from his chair's armrest, and the chamber filled with the voice of Admiral Korthvel. "Prime Counselor, we have a situation developing. Long-range sensors are detecting multiple human ships approaching our position. Military vessels." Marcus felt a cold smile touch his lips. He'd wondered when his backup would arrive. "How many ships, Admiral?" Zethmos asked, his voice carefully controlled. 12 vessels, frigate class and above. They'll reach our position in approximately 6 hours. The council members exchanged glances that carried centuries of shared understanding. 12 military ships was a significant force, especially for a species they dismissed as technologically inferior. "You called for reinforcements," accused Nethira. "This was planned from the beginning." Marcus shook his head. "I call for nothing. But Earth's military has a policy regarding diplomatic personnel. If an ambassador doesn't report in on schedule, they send people to find out why. And when those people discover that an ambassador has been attacked during supposedly peaceful negotiations," he shrugged. "Well, they tend to take a dim view of such things." Admiral Korthvel's voice crackled through the comm system again. "Prime Counselor, the human fleet is broadcasting on diplomatic frequencies. They're requesting permission to dock and verify the safety of their ambassador. Tell them," Marcus said before Zethmos could respond, "that Ambassador Chun is safe and continuing negotiations. But that recent events have highlighted the need for additional security measures." The Prime Counselor stared at Marcus for a long moment. "You're threatening us." "I am explaining consequences," Marcus corrected. "The 12 ships out there aren't a threat as long as negotiations continue in good faith. But if something happens to me, or if I fail to report in according to schedule," he let the implication hang in the air. "The Zephyrian Collective has faced human military forces before," Vorthanes said, but uncertainty colored his voice. "Your ships are inferior to ours in every way." "Individually, yes," Marcus agreed. "A single Zephyrian warship could probably destroy 2 or 3 human vessels in a straight fight. But humans have learned something during our short time in space. We've learned that superior technology means nothing if you're not willing to use it ruthlessly." He moved to one of the chamber's transparent walls and looked out at the stars, his reflection ghost-like against the cosmic backdrop. Tell me, counselors, when was the last time your species fought a real war? Not a police action against primitives or a minor border dispute, but a genuine life-or-death conflict where survival was at stake. The silence that followed his question was answer enough. Humans fought such wars for thousands of years before we ever left our planet. Marcus continued. We perfected the art of killing our own kind long before we learned to kill aliens. And while you've spent centuries convinced of your inherent superiority, we've been learning from every conflict, adapting, improving our tactics. He turned back to face the council, and something in his expression made several of them step backward. Those 12 ships out there, they're crewed by beings who grew up knowing that the universe is hostile, that survival requires strength, and that mercy is a luxury only the strong can afford. They won't hesitate to turn this station into expanding plasma if they believe their ambassador has been murdered. Counselor Ethmira leaned forward in her crystalline chair. And you? Would you order such destruction? Marcus considered the question seriously. I hope it won't come to that. But if you force the choice between human lives and Zephyrian lives, he shrugged. I'm human. The math isn't complicated. The chamber fell silent except for the distant hum of the station's systems and the soft whisper of recycled air. Outside the transparent walls, stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the mortal concerns of the beings who had come to negotiate among them. Prime Counselor Zethmos stood slowly, his ancient form unfolding with the dignity of ages. Ambassador Chun, he said formally, it appears we have underestimated your species. Perhaps it is time for us to reconsider our positions. Marcus straightened his tie and picked up his briefcase. Perhaps it is, Prime Counselor. Shall we start over? The negotiations resumed in a smaller chamber deep within the station's core, far from the crystal sphere where 3 Zephyrian warriors lay cooling in pools of silver blood. Marcus noticed the change in venue was strategic. The new room had no transparent walls, no view of the approaching human fleet, and multiple exit points that would allow the council members to escape quickly if things went wrong again. He also noticed the subtle energy barriers humming in the walls. The Zephyrians weren't taking any chances this time. The Kepler 442 system, Prime Counselor Zethmos began, his voice carefully neutral, contains more than just rare Earth deposits. Our surveys have identified energy signatures that suggest ancient technology buried beneath the planetary surface. Marcus set his briefcase on the oval table that seemed to grow from the floor, like everything else in Zephyrian architecture. Define ancient technology. Artifacts that predate both our species, answered Counselor Ethmira. Possibly remnants of the Forerunner civilization that vanished from this galactic sector 3 million years ago. This was new information. Marcus's briefings had mentioned nothing about Forerunner ruins, which meant either Earth's intelligence network had missed something crucial, or the Zephyrians had only recently discovered whatever was hidden on Kepler 442b. That changes the parameters significantly, Marcus said. Earth's interest was purely economic, mining rights for rare Earth elements to support our outer rim colonies. We had no knowledge of archaeological significance. Counselor Vorthanes leaned back in his chair, which adjusted its shape to accommodate his movement. And now that you do have such knowledge, will Earth still be content with simple mining operations? Marcus considered his answer carefully. The truth was that Earth's xenoarchaeology division would kill for access to genuine foreign artifacts. The technological advances possible from studying such relics could advance human civilization by centuries. But admitting that level of interest would give the Zephyrians enormous leverage in negotiations. Earth has always respected archaeological discoveries, he said diplomatically. We would be happy to participate in any joint research efforts under appropriate supervision. Appropriate supervision, repeated Nethura with what might have been amusement. Meaning Zephyrian supervision, of course. Meaning whatever supervision ensures the artifacts are studied properly and safely, Marcus corrected. Earth brings significant expertise in xenoarchaeology. Our teams have successfully excavated Martian ruins, Titan burial sites, and the crystal libraries of Europa. We're not amateurs in this field. Prime Counselor Zethmos touched a control, and a holographic display materialized above the table, showing a three-dimensional map of the Kepler 442 system. The target planet rotated slowly, its surface marked with energy signatures that pulsed like heartbeats. The readings we're detecting are unlike anything our scientists have encountered, Zethmos explained. The energy patterns suggest technology that operates on principles our physics cannot explain. This is not simply a matter of advanced engineering. This may be evidence of fundamental knowledge that could revolutionize our understanding of the universe. Marcus studied the display, noting the concentration of energy signatures around what appeared to be a vast complex buried beneath the planet's northern continent. Even from the hologram, he could see that whatever lay hidden there was enormous. Not a single structure, but an entire city or research facility. Have your people attempted any excavation? He asked. Preliminary surveys only, admitted Counselor Ethmira. Our teams encountered unexpected phenomena. Energy fields that disrupted equipment, gravitational anomalies that defied explanation, and temporal distortions that caused instruments to age decades in moments. Marcus felt a familiar chill run down his spine. He'd encountered Forerunner technology twice during his special operations career, both times in classified missions that officially never happened. The ancient artifacts were beautiful, elegant, and absolutely lethal to anyone who approached them without proper precautions. Temporal distortions, he repeated. What kind of effects are we talking about? Our lead archaeologist spent 30 minutes inside one of the energy fields, Vorthanes said quietly. When he emerged, his equipment registered that 3 years had passed. His biological age remained unchanged, but every electronic device he carried had aged normally. Computer systems that should have lasted decades were reduced to scrap metal. Marcus nodded slowly. Differential temporal fields. We've encountered similar phenomena in the ruins on Titan. The Forerunners seem to have used time itself as a tool. Their technology exists partially outside normal temporal flow. The council members exchanged glances that Marcus had learned to interpret as surprise. Clearly, they hadn't expected humans to have any experience with such advanced concepts. You've dealt with similar situations? Asked Zethmos. Successfully? Define successfully, Marcus said dryly. We lost 2 teams learning how to approach Forerunner sites safely. But we did eventually develop protocols that allow limited exploration without catastrophic casualties. He opened his briefcase and withdrew a datapad, scrolling through classified files that he probably shouldn't be sharing with alien governments. But circumstances had moved far beyond normal diplomatic protocols. The key is understanding that Forerunner technology responds to intention as much as action, Marcus explained. Their systems seem designed to evaluate the purpose and mindset of approaching beings. Approach with hostile intent or purely acquisitive motives, and the defenses activate. Approach with genuine scientific curiosity and respect for the knowledge being sought. And prompted Ethmira. And sometimes they let you in, Marcus finished. Not always. Not safely. But sometimes. The chamber fell quiet except for the subtle harmonics that seemed to be built into every Zephyrian structure. Marcus could feel the council members reassessing the situation, recalculating the potential value of human involvement in their discovery. This changes the nature of our discussion considerably, Zethmos said finally. If human expertise could provide access to these ruins, it might, Marcus said carefully, but it would require full partnership. Not mining rights granted as a favor to inferior beings, but genuine collaboration between equals working towards shared goals. Counselor Vorthanes stiffened at the word equals, but he didn't voice an objection. The 3 dead warriors in the crystal chamber had made certain arguments difficult to sustain. A soft chime indicated an incoming communication. Zethmos activated the display, revealing Admiral Korthvel's face. The military commander looked tense, his usual composed demeanor showing cracks of uncertainty. Prime Counselor, the Admiral said, the human fleet has moved into standard diplomatic formation around our station. Their commander, Admiral Sarah Chun, is requesting permission to come aboard for a security briefing with her ambassador. Marcus felt a smile tug at his lips despite the seriousness of the situation. Sarah Chun was his sister and one of the most competent military commanders Earth had ever produced. She was also absolutely ruthless when protecting people she cared about. Admiral Chun, Zethmos repeated, looking at Marcus with new understanding. A relative of yours? My sister, Marcus admitted. I should probably mention that she's not nearly as diplomatic as I am. You consider yourself diplomatic? Asked Nethura incredulously. Compared to Sarah? Absolutely. She tends to solve problems by shooting them until they stop being problems. Admiral Korthvel's voice interrupted their exchange. Prime Counselor, Admiral Chun, is insistent. She's made it clear that she will board this station with or without permission if she doesn't receive confirmation of her brother's safety within the next 30 minutes. Marcus checked his chronometer and realized he was already overdue for his scheduled check-in. Sarah would be operating under the assumption that something had gone wrong, which meant she was probably planning military action even as they spoke. I should probably speak with her, he said, standing and smoothing his jacket. If you don't mind, I'd like to include her in these discussions. Admiral Chun has experience with Forerunner sites, and her ships could provide security for any joint excavation efforts. Security against what? Asked Counselor Ethmira. Other interested parties, Marcus said simply. We're about Forerunner ruins travels fast in certain circles. Pirates, mercenary archaeologists, rogue AI collectives, and worse. If you want to keep your discovery secret long enough to study it properly, you'll need serious firepower watching over the operation. Prime Counselor Zethmos was quiet for a long moment, his ancient eyes studying the holographic display of Kepler 442b. Marcus could see the internal debate playing out across the aliens' features. Accept human partnership and potentially gain access to invaluable Forerunner knowledge, or maintain traditional Zephyrian superiority and risk losing everything to better-armed scavengers. Very well, Zethmos said finally. Invite Admiral Chun to join our discussions. But, Ambassador Chun, yes, I trust that your sister is more restrained than the warriors who attacked you earlier. Marcus thought about Sarah's tendency to shoot first and ask questions later, about her collection of weapons that officially didn't exist, about her cheerful willingness to violate 17 different interstellar treaties if it meant protecting her family. Oh, she's very restrained, he said with perfect diplomatic sincerity, as long as everyone remembers their manners. The communication channel opened, and Marcus found himself looking at his sister's face for the first time in 8 months. Admiral Sarah Chun looked exactly like what she was, a human who had clawed her way up through the ranks of Earth's military by being tougher, smarter, and more willing to take risks than anyone around her. Her dark hair was pulled back in regulation style. Her uniform was crisp despite weeks of space travel, and her eyes held the kind of cold intelligence that had made her a legend in military circles. Marcus, she said, and her voice carried relief, anger, and the promise of violence in equal measure. Are you injured? I'm fine, Sada. Just some misunderstandings that have been cleared up. He gestured to the council members. I'm in negotiations with the Zephyrian Council regarding a joint archaeological expedition. Your timing is actually perfect. Sarah's eyes shifted to study the alien leaders, and Marcus saw her cataloging details with the same professional assessment he'd learned during his own military career. Threat levels, escape routes, weapon placement, defensive positions. Old habits that had kept both siblings alive through situations that should have killed them. Joint expedition? She asked. That's a significant expansion from simple mining rights. Recent intelligence has revealed that Kepler 442b contains Forerunner ruins, Marcus explained. Extensive ones with active technology that requires specialized handling. Sarah's expression didn't change, but Marcus caught the slight tightening around her eyes that indicated intense interest. She'd been part of the Titan excavation team that had discovered the Forerunner crystal libraries. She knew exactly what such a find could mean. "I see," she said carefully. "And the Zephyrian Council is willing to accept human partnership in such an endeavor?" Prime Counselor Zethmos leaned forward until he was visible in the communication display. "Admiral Chun, recent events have demonstrated that human capabilities have been underestimated by our intelligence services. We believe that cooperation may be more beneficial than previously calculated." "Recent events?" Sarah asked, and her tone carried the kind of casual curiosity that made smart people nervous. "Nothing significant," Marcus said quickly. "Just a clarification of positions." Sarah studied her brother's face for a moment, taking in details that only someone who'd known him his entire life would notice. The slight wrinkle in his jacket that suggested physical activity, the way he held his right shoulder that indicated recent combat, the careful positioning that kept his hands free for quick movement. "I see," she said again, and this time her voice carried the promise of later questions that Marcus would have to answer honestly. "Well, if the Council is interested in cooperation, I'd be happy to discuss security arrangements for such an operation. May I come aboard?" "Of course," Zethmos said. "Docking Bay 7 will accommodate your shuttle." The communication ended, and Marcus turned back to the Council members. "I should probably mention that Admiral Chun commands the 7th Fleet's Special Operations Division. Her ships are equipped with experimental weapons systems, and her crews are trained for extended deep space operations." "Experimental weapons?" asked Vorthanes nervously. "Nothing that violates interstellar treaties," Marcus said. "At least, nothing that officially exists." The Council members exchanged looks that suggested they were beginning to understand that partnering with humans meant accepting a very different approach to problem-solving than they were accustomed to. "Perhaps," said Counselor Ethmira slowly, "we should discuss the specific terms of this partnership before Admiral Chun arrives." Marcus smiled and opened his briefcase. "An excellent idea. Shall we begin with security protocols?" Admiral Sarah Chun stepped off her shuttle with the confident stride of someone who owned whatever space she happened to be standing in. Marcus watched his sister's entrance through the chamber security feeds, noting how her escort of 6 human Marines managed to look both respectful and absolutely lethal at the same time. The Zephyrians had provided an honor guard of their own, but Marcus could see the uncertainty in their movements. Word of what had happened in the crystal chamber had apparently spread through the station's crew, and no one seemed entirely certain how to treat humans anymore. "She doesn't look like a diplomat," observed Counselor Nethira as they watched Sarah navigate the station's crystalline corridors. "That's because she's not," Marcus replied. "Sarah believes in solving problems permanently rather than politely." 20 minutes later, Admiral Chun entered the council chamber with the kind of presence that made the room feel smaller and more dangerous. She was shorter than Marcus, but carried herself with the absolute certainty of someone who had never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved with the right application of force. "Prime Counselor Zethmos," she said, offering a respectful nod. "Thank you for hosting these discussions. I understand there have been some developments that require military consultation." Zethmos gestured to a chair that grew from the floor to accommodate human physiology. "Admiral Chun, your brother has been most educational in correcting certain misconceptions about human capabilities. We find ourselves in need of new perspectives on old problems." Sarah took her seat without taking her eyes off the council members. Marcus recognized the behavior from their childhood. Sarah had always studied her environment completely before relaxing, cataloging threats and advantages with methodical precision. "The Kepler 442 discovery," she said without preamble. Marcus mentioned Forerunner ruins with active technology. "What kind of defensive capabilities are we looking at?" "That's complicated," admitted Counselor Ethmira. She activated a holographic display that showed the survey data from the buried complex. The energy signatures suggest multiple overlapping defensive systems. Some appear to be purely technological, while others seemed to manipulate fundamental forces in ways our science cannot explain. Sarah studied the display with professional interest. Temporal distortions, gravitational anomalies, and what looks like localized space-time folding. Classic Forerunner security architecture. How many people have you lost attempting access? Lost? Asked Vorthanes. Dead, missing, or transformed beyond recognition, Sarah clarified matter-of-factly. Forerunner sites are beautiful museums that double as extremely creative execution chambers. The crystal libraries on Titan killed 43 researchers before we learned proper approach protocols. The council members looked uncomfortable with her directness, but Marcus appreciated his sister's refusal to soften harsh realities. Military commanders who couldn't face casualties honestly had no business sending people into danger. We have lost no personnel, Zeth Mose said stiffly. Our preliminary surveys were conducted remotely. Smart, Sarah acknowledged. What did your remote drones discover before they were destroyed? How did you know they were destroyed? Asked Counselor Ethmira. Sarah gestured to the holographic display. Because you're showing me energy pattern analysis instead of actual footage. Forerunner defensive systems target artificial intelligence first, biological intelligence second. Your drones probably lasted about 30 seconds once they got close to the main complex. The uncomfortable silence that followed confirmed her assessment. The question, Sarah continued, is whether you want to continue losing expensive equipment to trial and error exploration, or whether you'd prefer to work with people who've actually figured out how to survive Forerunner encounters. And what would such cooperation entail? Asked Zeth Mose carefully. Sarah opened a secure datapad and began scrolling through classified files. Joint expedition teams with mixed human-Zephyrian personnel. My ships provide orbital security and evacuation capabilities. Earth provides xenoarchaeological expertise and Forerunner-specific equipment. The collective provides local knowledge and administrative authority. Administrative authority? Repeated Vorthanes suspiciously. It's your star system, Sarah said with a shrug. We're not interested in conquest or permanent occupation. We want access to the ruins, protection for the research teams, and shared access to whatever discoveries are made. When the expedition is complete, we go home. Marcus watched the council members process this information. The offer was more generous than traditional Zephyrian negotiations, which usually involved extensive demands for tribute and submission. But Sarah had always believed that fair partnerships lasted longer than conquered territories. What guarantees do we have that human forces will withdraw when promised? Asked Nethira. Sarah smiled, and the expression was not entirely reassuring. Because if we want to take your system by force, we would have done it already instead of bothering with negotiations. 12 ships isn't our full capability, Counselor. It's just what we brought for diplomatic escort duty. Prime Counselor Zeth Mose leaned forward in his crystalline chair. How many ships could Earth deploy if necessary? That depends, Sarah said, on whether we're talking about local defense, system conquest, or the kind of full-scale operation we'd mount if someone killed my brother during supposedly peaceful negotiations. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. The last option would involve approximately 200 ships, Sarah continued conversationally, including several experimental vessels that don't officially exist and carry weapons that definitely don't officially exist. Marcus decided it was time to steer the conversation back toward productive channels. Sarah, perhaps we could focus on the positive aspects of cooperation rather than the consequences of betrayal. Of course, his sister agreed. The positive aspects are much more interesting anyway. She manipulated her datapad, and the room's holographic display changed to show detailed schematics of human excavation equipment. Temporal stabilizers to neutralize time distortion fields. Gravitational anchors to prevent spatial folding from separating team members. And AI-shielded communication systems that can maintain contact even when conventional electronics are being actively attacked by Forerunner security protocols. The technology was impressive, clearly beyond current Zephyrian capabilities in several key areas. Marcus saw recognition in the council members' expressions as they realized that human engineering had solved problems their own science hadn't even properly identified yet. "These systems have been tested?" asked Counselor Ethmira. "Extensively," Sarah confirmed. "We've successfully excavated 4 major Forerunner sites using this equipment. 0 casualties in the last 3 operations." "In the first operation?" asked Vorthanese. Sarah's expression darkened slightly. "The first operation was how we learned to build the equipment. 15 good people died because we thought we could approach Forerunner technology the same way we approach human archaeology. We learned better. The honesty was brutal but effective." Marcus could see the council members appreciating his sister's willingness to admit costly mistakes rather than pretending human methods were infallible. "There's something else you should know," Marcus added. "Earth's Xenoarchaeological Division has developed translation protocols for Forerunner data systems. If the ruins contain information archives, we may be able to access and interpret the contents." This revelation caused a stir among the council members. Access to Forerunner knowledge was the ultimate prize, something that could advance any civilization by millions of years if properly understood. "Translation protocols," Zethmos repeated slowly. "You can read Forerunner script?" "Some of it," Marcus said carefully. "The mathematical and scientific notations are mostly universal. Cultural and historical texts are more challenging, but we've made significant progress." Sarah pulled up another file on her datapad, showing samples of translated Forerunner documents. Physics equations that describe faster-than-light travel without requiring exotic matter. Energy generation systems that tap directly into quantum vacuum fluctuations. Medical technologies that can repair cellular damage at the atomic level. The implications were staggering. Every civilization in the galaxy had spent millions of years trying to rediscover Forerunner knowledge, with limited success. The possibility that humans had actually cracked their information systems was enough to shift the balance of power between species. "How?" asked Ethmira. "Forerunner script has resisted translation attempts for 3 million years. Because everyone assumed it was purely linguistic," Marcus explained. "Humans approached it as a combination of language, mathematics, and programming code. Forerunner writing is actually sophisticated software that adapts its meaning based on the reader's knowledge level and conceptual framework. The text literally teaches itself to the reader," Sarah added. "But only if you approach it with the right combination of respect, curiosity, and technological sophistication. Most species try to brute force their way through the encryption. Humans learn to ask the archives to teach us." The council chamber fell silent as the full magnitude of human discoveries sank in. Marcus realized they had just fundamentally changed the negotiating landscape. What had started as a request for mining rights had become an offer to share potentially civilization-altering knowledge. "This partnership," Zethmos said finally, his ancient voice carrying new weight. "It would not be between equals." "No," agreed Sarah. "It wouldn't. Humans have capabilities you lack, and Zephyrians have capabilities we lack. That's what makes partnership valuable instead of redundant. And if we refuse..." Sarah's expression remained neutral, but her voice carried the kind of finality that ended arguments. "Then you can spend the next 1,000 years losing drones to Forerunner security systems while other species develop faster-than-light travel and energy technologies you can't even comprehend." She leaned back in her chair, the movement somehow managing to be both relaxed and threatening. "Or you can work with us to unlock secrets that could benefit both our civilizations for millions of years. Your choice." Marcus watched the council members struggle with concepts that challenged 3 centuries of assumed superiority. The Zephyrians had built their entire identity around being the most advanced species in their region of space. Accepting human partnership meant acknowledging that advancement wasn't the same as adaptability. "We need time to consider these proposals," Zethmos said finally. "Of course," Marcus replied diplomatically. "Take all the time you need. But I should mention that long-range sensors have detected energy fluctuations around Kepler, 442b that suggest the Forerunner systems are becoming more active. More active how? Asked Nethira. Sarah consulted her datapad. Could be anything from automated maintenance cycles to full defensive awakening. Forerunner sites sometimes respond to external attention by increasing their security protocols. The longer we wait to begin proper exploration, the more dangerous the ruins are likely to become. How long do we have? Asked Mira. Unknown, Marcus admitted. Could be weeks, could be months. But Forerunner defensive systems follow exponential escalation patterns. If we're going to do this, sooner is definitely better than later. The weight of decision settled over the chamber like a physical thing. Marcus could see the council members wrestling with the choice between pride and pragmatism, between traditional Zephyrian superiority and the unprecedented opportunity that human partnership represented. Outside the station, 12 human warships waited in patient formation, their crews ready for whatever orders Admiral Chen might give. And, far beyond them, in the Kepler 442 system, ancient technologies stirred to life in response to the attention of younger species, preparing to either share their secrets or defend them with weapons that could unmake reality itself. The universe held its breath, waiting to see which path would be chosen. 6 hours later, the Zephyrian Council reconvened with a decision that would reshape interstellar politics for generations. Prime Counselor Zethmos looked older than his 3 centuries as he faced the 2 human siblings who had upended everything his species believed about their place in the universe. The Zephyrian Collective accepts the proposed partnership, he announced, his voice carrying the weight of historical inevitability. We will establish a joint expedition to explore the Kepler 442 ruins under shared command structure and mutual benefit agreements. Marcus felt a careful satisfaction. 6 months of preparation, 3 days of negotiations, and 1 very educational combat encounter had produced exactly the result Earth needed. But he was professional enough to recognize that the real work was just beginning. Excellent, he said formally. Earth's Xenoarchaeological Division will begin deployment preparations immediately. Admiral Chun, how long until your specialized equipment can be in position? Sarah consulted her command tablet. 72 hours for the primary excavation package. The heavy equipment will take another week, but we can begin preliminary surveys with what we have. Preliminary surveys, repeated Counselor Mira. What exactly does that involve? Passive observation from safe distance, Sarah explained. We map energy fields, identify safe approach routes, and establish base camps outside the defensive perimeter. No direct contact with Forerunner systems until we understand what we're dealing with. The plan was sound, Marcus thought. Conservative enough to minimize casualties, aggressive enough to produce results before the ruined security systems could fully activate. He'd seen too many archaeological expeditions fail because they rushed into dangerous situations without proper preparation. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority communication. Admiral Korthvel's face appeared in the chamber's holographic display, his expression grim. Prime Counselor, we're detecting multiple hyperspace signatures approaching the Kepler 442 system. Unknown vessels, at least 15 ships. They'll reach the planet in approximately 18 hours. The mood in the chamber shifted instantly. Marcus felt his combat instincts activate as he processed the implications. Someone else had detected the energy fluctuations from the ruins, and they were coming with significant force. Ship classifications? Sarah asked, her voice sharp with professional focus. Admiral Korthvel manipulated his console, and the display showed tactical readings from the approaching fleet. Mixed composition. Several appear to be Corvin heavy cruisers, but there are designs we don't recognize. Possibly mercenary vessels or independent operators. Marcus exchanged glances with his sister. The Corvin Syndicate was known throughout the galaxy as ruthless scavengers who specialized in raiding archaeological sites. If they'd learned about the Forerunner ruins, the situation had just become infinitely more complicated. Corvins, Zethmos said with distaste. Pirates and grave robbers. They have no respect for proper archaeological protocols. They also have no respect for prior claims or territorial sovereignty, added Vorthanes. If they're coming to Kepler 442, they intend to take whatever they can carry. Sarah was already pulling up tactical displays on her command tablet. 15 ships is more than a simple raiding force. Someone's made a significant investment in this operation, which means they know something specific about what's down there, Marcus concluded. The question is how they found out. The council members exchanged uncomfortable looks that suggested they suspected the answer, but didn't want to voice it. Information leaks? Sarah asked bluntly. Possible, admitted Counselor Nethira. Station personnel have been discussing the discovery. Word may have spread beyond our control. Marcus felt a familiar cold anger settle in his chest. Operational security failures had killed more archaeological teams than hostile aliens or dangerous ruins combined. Someone's loose talk had potentially doomed the entire expedition. Options, he asked Sarah. His sister was already running calculations. We can reach Kepler 442 in 16 hours if we push our engines. That gives us a 2-hour window to establish defensive positions before the Corvin fleet arrives. Defensive positions around an active Forerunner site, Marcus pointed out. That's going to be interesting. Interesting is one word for it, Sarah agreed grimly. But the alternative is letting pirates strip mine 3 million years of accumulated knowledge. Prime Counselor Zeth Mose stood slowly, his ancient frame radiating the kind of dignity that came from making hard decisions. Admiral Chun, how many ships would you need to guarantee victory against 15 Corvin vessels? Sarah's smile was not pleasant. Guarantee is a strong word, Prime Counselor. But give me 8 human ships and whatever Zephyrian vessels you can spare, and I'll guarantee the Corvins won't be taking anything home. You would commit Earth's forces to defend Zephyrian territory? Asked Ethmira with surprise. I would commit Earth's forces to defend our mutual interests, Sarah corrected. The Forerunner ruins belong to whoever's strong enough to protect them and smart enough to study them properly. That's not the Corvin Syndicate. Marcus watched the council members process this declaration. Traditional Zephyrian politics didn't include concepts like mutual defense or shared interests. Their species had spent millennia as unchallenged rulers of their region of space, dealing with other civilizations from positions of overwhelming superiority. But the last 24 hours had shattered those assumptions completely. Very well, Zethmos decided. The collective will commit 8 ships to joint defense operations. Admiral Korthvel, prepare the 4th Fleet for immediate deployment to Kepler 442. Acknowledged Prime Counselor. Fleet will be ready to depart in 4 hours. The communication ended, leaving the chamber filled with the kind of tense energy that preceded military operations. Marcus had felt it dozens of times during his special ops career, the electric anticipation of controlled violence about to be unleashed. This changes our excavation timeline, he pointed out. We'll be conducting archaeological research in an active combat zone. Not necessarily, Sarah said, pulling up star charts on her display. If we position ourselves correctly, we can use the Forerunner ruins as a defensive asset. Anyone trying to attack us will have to approach through the site's security perimeter. Using ancient alien death traps as military fortifications, Marcus mused. That's either brilliant or completely insane. Both, his sister agreed cheerfully. The best military strategies usually are. Counselor Vorthanes looked nervous. The risks are manageable if we do this right, Sarah interrupted. Forerunner defensive systems distinguish between different types of threats. Military vessels trigger different responses than archaeological teams. We position the fleet outside the danger zone and use shuttles for surface operations. She manipulated her tablet, and the holographic display showed a tactical overlay of the Kepler 442 system. Defensive positions, patrol routes, and excavation sites were marked in different colors, creating a complex, three-dimensional battle plan. The Corvins will expect to find empty ruins defended by whatever automated systems the Forerunners left behind, Sarah explained. They won't be prepared for coordinated resistance from 2 different species using combined tactics. Marcus studied the plan with professional appreciation. His sister had always been gifted at turning disadvantages into advantages, using enemy assumptions against them. "What about the ruins themselves?" he asked. "This much military activity is going to trigger every security protocol the Forerunners built into that place." "Probably," Sarah admitted. "But Forerunner systems are designed to protect knowledge, not destroy it. If we approach the ruins with genuine scientific intent, while the military action happens elsewhere, the defensive systems might discriminate between threats." "Might," emphasized Zethmos. "This is speculation. All military planning is speculation," Sarah replied. "The question is whether we speculate from positions of strength or positions of weakness." A new communication alert chimed, and Admiral Korthvel's face reappeared. "Prime Counselor, we're receiving additional sensor data from the approaching fleet. Some of those unrecognized ship designs are showing energy signatures consistent with Forerunner technology." The chamber fell silent. Marcus felt pieces clicking together in his mind, forming a picture he didn't like at all. "The Corvins have Forerunner weapons," he said flatly. "That would explain their confidence in attacking a defended archaeological site," Sarah observed grimly. "It also explains why they're coming with such force." Counselor Ethmira leaned forward. "Forerunner weapons are beyond anything our species have developed. If the Corvins have access to such technology, then this isn't a raiding expedition," Marcus finished. "It's a conquest operation. They're not just coming to loot the ruins. They're coming to establish permanent control over Forerunner space." The implications were staggering. A pirate syndicate with access to Forerunner military technology could challenge any government in the galaxy. The balance of power that had maintained interstellar stability for millennia would collapse overnight. "How did they acquire such weapons?" asked Zethmos. "Same way they found out about these ruins," Sarah said grimly. "Someone with access to classified information has been feeding them intelligence. This isn't random piracy. It's a coordinated campaign to acquire Forerunner technology." Marcus felt the familiar cold clarity of combat planning settling over his thoughts. The situation had moved far beyond archaeology or diplomacy. This was now a military operation with consequences that could affect the entire galaxy. "Sarah," he said quietly, "how do our weapons compare to Forerunner technology?" His sister's expression was grim. "Unfavorably. But Forerunner weapons are designed for precision, not overwhelming force. They're scalpels, not hammers. If we can force close-range engagement and prevent them from using their range advantage, we might survive long enough to accomplish our objectives," Marcus concluded. "Might," she agreed. Prime Counselor Zethmos stood, his ancient dignity intact despite the magnitude of the crisis. "Then we proceed as planned. Joint fleet deployment in 3 hours. Archaeological teams deploy as soon as minimum safety perimeters are established." "And if we fail?" asked Vorthanes quietly. Marcus thought about the implications of Forerunner technology in the hands of pirates and conquerors, about the civilizations that would fall to weapons that could manipulate time and space, about the knowledge that would be lost forever if the ruins were destroyed in the coming battle. "Then we make sure failure costs them everything they've gained," he said simply. Admiral Sarah Chun nodded approvingly. "Now you're thinking like a soldier, Marcus." Outside the station, human and Zephyrian warships began moving into formation, preparing for a battle that would determine the fate of Secret's 3 million years in the making. And in the Kepler 442 system, ancient machines sensed the approaching conflict and began activating defenses that had slumbered since the fall of their creators. The greatest archaeological discovery in galactic history was about to become the most dangerous battlefield anyone had ever fought on.